Hello, welcome to Quackalope. Thank you for being here. Today we're bringing you 10 rules for Dune Imperium that we're pretty confident you're missing when you sit down to play this at game night. Yes. Corey, why are we confident they're missing these 10 rules?
Because we made these mistakes ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I've played this game more than almost any other game throughout 2024. It was definitely on the rising list of contenders for my personal top 10 of all time, and I think it has broken that threshold. We'll see. I'll probably be releasing a new one, first time in 3 years, this coming year in 2025.
Looking forward to it.
You've played Dune Imperium and Dune Imperium Uprising dozens of times across the board now, especially if you include the app.
Absolutely.
So we've had room to make a few mistakes.
Absolutely.
All right, let's dive in.
Sure thing.
Rule number 1.
So obviously one of the big features here in Dune Imperium Uprising is the idea of having contracts. With the CHOME contracts, it is a separate module technically, but most people tend to play with it.
Always include it. It adds a little bit of variance to the board, worth adding in.
Agreed. But one of the things with the contracts that people can often get wrong is, especially if you have a situation where, especially when you have a situation where, there are so many contracts that do the exact same thing or require the same thing. This came up last night when we were playing the game where Boots had, these 3 harvest contracts and was wondering, hey, if I go and if I harvest, 4 spice, am I going to get all these? Am I just going to get one of these? And we went on, Boardgame Geek had a forum answer. Paul Denon, the game designer himself, said, no, you have to score all of them, and you get all of them multiple at one turn.
Yeah, you're required to score them, and multiple can be triggered in one fell swoop. So as you're collecting contract tiles, pay attention to synergies, because they can really make a single action highly powerful, especially at later stages in the game. Number 2, multiple worms. Worms are one of the new additions here, and we would argue, they're a central part of your long-term strategy when playing Uprising. If you're not getting worms, you're probably cognitively making the decision not to pursue them for the sake of other advantageous victory point scoring options, and you're hoping someone else doesn't go for them because they can be the game deciding factor. However, the part that we think is a little broken isn't extra broken. If you have a worm in combat, they're not only going to lend their strength, they're also going to double the rewards on that victory, only on the top part of that victory card. So if you come in the lead, meaning in round 3 or in stage 3, you're scoring victory points, you get the opportunity to do that twice. Initial one plus the resource cost twice. So you could score as many as 4 victory points for a single combat win. If you happen to be an insane person, and you have 2, 3, I don't know, all 4 worms because you think it's an objective, you got a little gold box, you want to add a star to the back of the rule book.
That would be very impressive.
It would be impressive, but what it wouldn't do is it wouldn't double up your rewards multiple times. Worms only add their duplicating ability a single time. They're not magic, they're just worms. Just because he had one in his brain doesn't make him any less stupid or more intelligent.
Different kind of worms, Jesse.
Talking about RFK.
Yes, I think everybody got
Number 3.
Number 3 is the rules regarding spy withdrawal here. So one of the fun things that Dune Uprising added was the idea of having spies and observation posts that you could then send your workers, your agents to while spots were occupied. I feel like this is one of those things that we constantly, every time we play this, have to look in the rule book just so that we clarify amongst ourselves.
It's either a new player is being introduced to Uprising, and therefore spies are a new feature of the game, and they don't quite understand how they operate, or we're just remembering that they add not only locational depth to where you can place down your people, but potentially a withdraw advantage if you need to draw extra cards. Yesterday, I used the withdraw and draw cards multiple times. So explain how that happens as a good refresher for how spies operate.
Yeah, so as far as operating with the spies, if you're going to be using a spy, first of all, you have to actually be able to go to that board space in question. So for example, if you have a spy on one of the faction boards, you have to actually be able to play a card that would send one of your agents to that spot. And then you would choose either to, if I'm going there and it's not occupied already, I can remove the spy to draw a card.
You don't have to.
Don't have to.
But you can. It's called intelligence gathering, I believe.
Gather intelligence, yes. Same thing. But the other one, and I think the more powerful ability of spies, obviously, is if it's already occupied, you can remove the spy to then just put your agent down there anyway and still get the benefit, and you're not necessarily blocked off from getting a space that maybe you kind of had plans to get for your overall, your overall game plan.
Yeah, so this can, of course, open up a location for you to go that you needed to go to. So put spies down where strategically you want the advantage later on in the game. There's not a lot of things other players can do to manipulate your spies. There are some, but not a ton. And
they're annoying when somebody does it.
Or the other thing that's worth remembering is that your deck can also be a very powerful tool, and sometimes a single card draw could be the difference between buying the recruit you're looking to buy, getting the extra combat in battle that you're looking to gain, or potentially even getting that 9th point necessary to get the Spice Must Flow card, which is a straight-up victory point and could be the difference between endgame victory or endgame loss. So, drawing up a card could literally change the course of the game.
Yep.
Number 4, let's talk about the High Council seat, something that I forget often, not only because it isn't involved in base game Dune, but also because I think the icon is just very small and oftentimes hidden by other people's council seats as they place them onto the board. Mm-hmm. One of the nice things that that Uprising does is that it gives you a space that transforms as you use the space. It does this in multiple areas as you gain, reputation, as you, recruit the hook, giving you a new way to utilize some of these desert planet locations, but specifically up here on the High Council seat. After you've purchased your High Council seat for 5 Solari, and you started accruing those 2 extra influence, 2 extra buy power in your market phase.
Easy to forget.
You can go back to that location on the same the same sequence if you have the ability, or previous or next turns, and you will gain 2 spice, 1 intrigue card, and 3 soldiers. They won't be able to be recruited into the battle immediately unless you have a modifier. However, there is no other location on the board that gives you access to 2 spice plus all the bonuses for a single placement. And sometimes gaining that extra spice, if there isn't bonus spice down here and you don't have water, which is very hard to come by in Uprising specifically, I sometimes have the extra money and I'm hunting, like searching, waiting for a whole round to pass so I can equip myself with the spice that I'm looking for.
He may have done that multiple times last night.
So last night I passed or sought out water in a couple of the rounds so that I could get the spice necessary to go do some of the actions I was hoping or intending to do. I had money, I didn't have water. Like that would have made a big difference, and I didn't even consider going there.
Thematically appropriate as well, I might add.
I feel like that's personal.
Yep.
Number 5.
Number 5 is recruiting worms. So how do you actually recruit the worms? Well, first of all, you have to make sure you get a maker hook. Maker hooks can either be found at Siege Tower. There are some cards, there's some effects that can give you the maker hook there, and then you would have to go to one of these lovely 2 spots here, either Haga Basin or the Deep Desert, to actually recruit the worms. Now, it's important to note that you can't always use the worms in a conflict, and sometimes that can be very easily missed. Some of these conflict cards, as a matter of fact, will specify it here at a small section at the bottom right-hand corner of the card to say, hey, you can't use sandworms for this one. That is, of course, unless you've broken the shield wall, which we did fairly early last night.
Which requires an action here at the basin or
at the Siege Tower.
The Siege Tower.
There's also intrigue cards that'll do it, other effects on cards that will do it. But yeah, so you might get the maker hook very early on, and then there's a powerful conflict card that shows up, but you can't put in the sandworm because of that, and it's something that's important to notice and something that could be easily overlooked.
Why do we think it's important to make a note of this? We all know sandworms exist. We understand they're part of the game, but I think for the first probably 5 plays of Uprising, I didn't want to mess with the sandworms because they took multiple steps in long-term strategy in order to get them into combat and utilize them. But the verdict is kind of out, and BGG has solidified, and I think reasonably argued based off statistics, that the worms are sort of the central strategy of Uprising. If someone's going for worms and winning conflict, which they're likely to do if they're doing a worm strategy, they are more likely, if not nearly guaranteed, to take victory. They have access to all the other victory points that you do. They have the ability to get them from intrigue cards. They have the secret, end game scoring ones from hidden objectives. They have the ability to score them from the influence track and from cards that they're purchasing in the market. The difference in doubling victory points in the last 2 to 3 rounds of the game is massive. It doesn't mean it's always going to end in a victory, but if left alone, worms can clinch the game.
Yeah, I mean, Mayor last night when we were playing this game, he had a turn where he was in last and by 2 points, I think, at least, where he was behind all of us. And then he ended up winning the conflict with the sandworm that gave him 3 points in total. And I think he was, 2 spice away maybe, or 2 money away from getting a 4th point as well. And that just rocketed him into the lead.
Yeah, the single worm win for him, and he had added 2 worms into the battle. Like, he played well.
Yeah.
But the single worm win was the difference between victory out of all the stuff that we did. There's other things we could have tweaked it. We could have kept it a little bit tighter, but worms was that big swing.
Yeah.
Pulled a guy from 4th place into 1st in a couple of rounds, 2 or 3 rounds at the end.
Yep.
All right. Point number 6. Locations have restrictions. Why are we mentioning this? Well, because I don't have good eyesight.
To say the least.
And apparently I don't ever double check if a location is viable for me to go to it.
Also, it's late at night.
I just sort of assume that I can. So there are 3 locations here in Uprising as opposed to the 1, I believe, in base game Dune.
That is correct.
Restricts your ability to go unless you have a relationship with the faction that leads there. Corey, you want to point them out and name the factions, which is the thing I can't do.
Yes, because I've actually read the books. Thank you very much. So there is Siege Tauber.
Read the first one.
I'm 200 pages into the 6th one. So there is Siege Tauber, which requires 2 influence with the Fremen. There is Imperial Privilege, which requires 2 influence with the Imperium or Emperor faction. And then there's Shipping all the way over there in the top right corner, which requires 2 influence with the Spacing Guild.
Yeah, and then I find, is this the Bene Gesserit?
Yeah.
I find that they tie a little bit more closely to cards that say if you have 2 influence. And so all of them have a threshold that interact with the state of Uprising. But those 3 locations are fairly central to endgame strategy. And if you haven't crossed that threshold, you might want to either reprioritize in future games or take a full turn just to get yourself across that 2-point threshold. Because here is going to directly interact with worms for the Fremen and be one of your most accessible points for water and water collection. Up there is going to be the way that you recall one of your workers, which if everyone else has their swordsman, it could be a way for you to delay or prolong your actions. And if everyone already has their swordsman, it's an excellent way to potentially create a cycle or a rhythm that allows you to play an extra 1 or even potentially 2 actions beyond what other people are doing. And then finally up here, again, kind of like we have over here, where you're trading 5 money, 5 Solari for 2 spice. You have the direct, inverse of this over here, or close to the direct inverse of this over here, which is going to have you spend 3 spice. You'll gain 5 money, and you'll go up a reputation track. So there's an interplay between the High Council seat and your shipping. You can almost just go back and forth between the 2 of them, pumping yourself up here if you either don't have the cards to play or other people have closed off this side of the board by having too many pieces, too many units. I mean, look at the game state. This is a real game. There is no room for anyone else here. What are you going to do about it?
And that really affected me at the end of the last game that we played, because the last 2 cards I had in my hand that last round both required going to one of these spaces, and I was blocked off.
Yeah, there's literally, that cycle there, by the way, is powerful enough that there is an intrigue card that gives you that exact equation, or near exact equation, of trading money for spice, spice for money, and it doesn't even have the additional bonuses of gaining reputation, gaining army, gaining intrigue. So it's a good little cycle back and forth. Let's talk about point number 7.
Point number 7 is just mentioned by Jesse, is the fact, going back to this Imperial privilege spot, allows you to recall an agent. Now, recalling an agent can be from anywhere on the board that you have an agent. It could even be the Imperial privilege spot itself that you just went to. In
one of the games last night, I wasn't eligible to go here.
He tried to do it.
However, I was set up in a position where I didn't have the cards that I needed, but I did have enough money to just waste it. And so I was just gonna continue going there until I found the cards I was looking for by placing, activating, drawing a card, recalling, and going at it again.
Until we noticed the fact that Jesse did not have any influence on the Imperial track.
Yeah, I mean that's a factor. We've already went over that rule. You know, it's something to pay attention to, and we caught it. But that's besides the point.
Yep.
Bonus spice. Bonus spice is very nice. Bonus spice is always nice. Remember that rhyme, and you won't miss out.
It's also the sixth Spice Girl?
I think so. Yeah, bonus spice is the sixth Spice Girl. What do we mean by bonus spice? Well, when you recruit a worm, you sacrifice the harvesting spice that is on the ground. The worm has swallowed it. He has gobbled it up. But worms fill up quickly. I think that's lore, right? Worms fill up quickly.
I mean, they approach very quickly if you're making a lot of noise.
Yeah, they're constantly stuffed. They're never looking for extra spice. And so the bonus spice that's sitting on the map that's just accumulated on the top of the dunes, if you're going to ride a worm, why not pick some of that up as you zoom on by? So a place like the deep desert down here could have as much as 3, 4, 5 bonus spice on it because it's so expensive to go to. If you're going there, you're sacrificing 4 to recruit the 2 worms. You also might be picking up a pile of extra spice along with them.
Yeah.
Worth considering.
Which Boots, I think, used to his distinct advantage last night.
Yeah, it was significant. Number 9.
Number 9 involves the spy icon, which are shown on cards like this, which I purchased last night and used to great effect. So if you see an agent card that has this icon on it, this allows you to go to any location that has a spy attached to it. So for example, Jesse, if you notice, has a spy on the observation post next to research station and spice refinery. So if Jesse were to play this card, he would be able to send an agent to either one of those spots over there just because his spy was there, and he would not have to remove the spy. Yeah. Although, to be clear, if it was already occupied, he would still have to remove the spy in order to place there.
Yeah, and I could get the bonus, like we said, of drawing a card if I chose to remove the spy.
Correct.
The reason I wanted to mention this isn't because you forget about it if it's in your hand. I mean, if you've purchased that card and you're using it, you're probably going to remember it. But early on, it's not always the first thing that comes across your mind when deciding where to place down a spy. Sometimes I just kind of throw them out there where I think it's distracting, or like maybe I want to go to this location and use it as a way to pull back or go to a location where someone else already is. However, this is a third point of strategy that's necessary for late game play. Not only do spies open the door for interesting manipulation of the board, but in your hand, in your deck, if you've purchased or have the opportunity to purchase some of these cards can directly modify themselves to fit where your spies are. Why does that matter? Well, it's really easy to find yourself in a position where you've drawn up without the icon, specifically the reputation track, without the icon necessary for the action that you want to take. I spent multiple battles missing out on a conflict because I couldn't get up here to the Spacing Guild. I couldn't find a card that would allow me to play there. If I'd had one of these cards in my hand, just a single one of them that I'd drawn up, and I had a spy over there because I'd planted it early in the game, I would be in a great position to get involved in battle, to spend my spice, to recruit tons of warriors.
Yeah, and I mean, so for example, why I said I used it to great effect was I paired it eventually with this reliable informant who, as part of the agent text, allows me to put a spy on one of those faction spots. So if I then put it, let's say, on the Fremen or on the Bene Gesserit, I can then use the guild spy to just go to one of those, and it's extremely helpful.
And just to point out a note, it's not just Space and Guild that's benefited off of this. You have, I believe most factions have some type of interaction, or cards have adjacency interactions with this. So we have an Emperor card here that has the same icon sitting on it. It is worth remembering that where you place your spy may also be where your cards activate after you've purchased from the market row. Moving on down to our final point.
The final point to mention is, as opposed to many games that you may have played with your family, your game group, etc., getting to 10 points doesn't necessarily trigger the end of the game. Now, to be clear, if it's the end of the round and somebody's gotten 10 points, of course that triggers the end of this game.
So here's where this comes to mind. And for me, it matters more on how you're approaching the point at which someone has crossed what many consider to be the finish line. If you've played Viticulture or you've played Root, you know that there are games out there that once a threshold has been breached, it is either all over and that person has won, or we then are just moving to the stage of the game where we process victory points, make sure we've crossed our I's and dotted our T's, and looked at everything to figure out who's actually won the game. Well, in Dune, that doesn't have to be the case. If someone has crossed the threshold, going from 9 to 10, and you're able to, either through strategic card play or in the most common of instances, crossing them over here on the reputation track for your influence, or what's that called? For your seal, you're bonded with the house, you're bonded with the people. If you're able to steal a victory point from them,
I think they call it.
I don't know. If you're able to steal a victory point from them by taking the token, taking the highest token. Taking the alliance token, that's what I was looking for.
Indeed.
The highest point on this track, they will come down. And that means you have an entire another round to strategize, to add in worms, to look for some of those hidden victory points that are in the intrigue deck, or potentially buy the Spice Must Flow. And most games of Dune Imperium Uprising, for me, have ended in the 12 to 16 point threshold, not on the 10. If you're coming from base game Dune, I've seen lots and lots of games in base game Dune 1 at 10.
Oh, yeah.
That's not the case here. And it's important to remember that, because one more round, one more chance, one more opportunity could make all the difference.
So you're saying there's a chance.
And that's the important thing to remember. If someone has crossed that threshold, don't put yourself into a position where you're saying, all right, well, let me just score as much as I can then, or game's over, it's time to shift my headspace to the point of calculating the final score. No. Try to pull them back. Try to rope in your victory. Do everything you can to maintain and make sure that line's not crossed until you're ready for it to be crossed.
Absolutely.
All right. Let us know what points that you've forgotten, what things are helpful to remember, or what cheat sheets you have written down, or the friend that sits across the table and always catches that one mistake you constantly make. And if you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button down below. Not only are we doing a lot of coverage on Dune, Dune Imperium Uprising, and all the expansions that currently exist, including gameplays, strategy guides, quick start guides, rules videos, etc., etc., but we do this with a number of different board games as well. And we're slowly going through most of the ones you're probably familiar with. We're talking Monopoly, Risk, Poker.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, sorry. I mean, Root, Ark Nova.
Terraforming
Mars. Beyond
the Sun.
The good ones.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever the case, though, whatever you do, remember to do the important thing. If they don't catch you cheating, don't do it anyway. It's not nice. Mistakes are mistakes, but willful negligence is only something that one guy in our game group does, and we like him. We like him. What's his name?
Dan!
We'll see you later. Bye.